We do have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, committee and guests. I guess first thing it would be the hearing on SCR 1610. Maybe we'll wait a couple minutes since it is new. Both of these pieces of legislations are new to the committee and to the body, so I would like to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of them. Amelia, do you mind? Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Concurrent Resolution number 1610 is a proposition to amend Section 1 of Article 11 of the Kansas Constitution relating to property taxation. The resolution proposes to limit annual valuation increases of real property or real estate, except in certain circumstances. For the assessment and taxation of property on and after January 1 of 2025, the amendment would provide that the valuation of any real property shall not increase by more than 3% in any taxable year, except when one of some exceptions apply. The first is that when the property includes new construction or improvements have been made to the property, the class or subclass of the property changes, the property becomes disqualified from exemption, the property is first listed as escaped or omitted property, or the legal description of the land or lot has changed. The legislature may define new construction or improvements by law and also enact other such legislation as is necessary to administer the provision. The proposed amendment would be submitted to electors at the November 2024 general election unless a special election is called at a sooner date. And I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, are there any questions? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amelia, thanks for being here this morning. So I guess the question I have is that obviously this is putting, this would be on the this would be on a ballot, so basically a constitutional amendment. So, but does this legislation have to be on the ballot because basically by currently, would it be, I guess what I'm saying is that currently right now, is it unconstitutional to limit valuation increase by an arbitrary amount?
Amelia.
I believe it would be our opinion that a limit such as this in a statutory form may violate the uniform and equal provision that is in the Constitution, if this were in a statutory form.
Senator Holland.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Thank you, Amelia. First testimony is Representative Ken Corbett. Welcome back to the Tax Committee.
Appraisers from several counties and everybody on the tax committee just drilling them because all of our constituents are just mad. And the bottom thing that came out of that, they said, we just are following the law that you have given us. And he says, if you don't like it, change it. So this will be a change that I think would solve the problem. I'm just reminding all my constituents from all over Kansas to receive their property tax statements this month. This is really just controlled robbery, and it is robbery. It's an unjust tax system. I'm asking you to do the following. Every Kansan who owns a home or a farm should not have to buy their home or farm twice or more. We have a farm that we own. It's been in our family for 150 years. Can you imagine how many times I bought that farm? That's not from the bank, that's from the county. So this is what I think would be a thing that needs to happen for 24 or 25 and beyond. The purchase price you pay for your home or your farm is what it will be, and it will be frozen so that the taxes do not go up until it's sold. They can still play with your valuations and mill levies and play the shell game we've played since '82, but it's frozen till you move. And then once you move, you make the decision if you want to pay the increased taxes. And when you move, your house goes back to current valuation at tax level. If you listen to the retirees and people who are coming and going from this state, that's one of the biggest things. I've known people who come to Topeka, bought a house, kind of got their taxes and said, man, I can't handle this. But I think in the long run, this would provide stability for your income, and I think it might even slow down the outward migration of people just leaving this state, and people could actually have a budget, and I think the dollars will still roll in. So that's about what it is, and I'll stand for questions if you'd like.
Thank you, Representative. Committee questions? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, thanks for being here. So I want to be clear, I understand what you're saying. First of all, when you talk about your home or your farm, are you referring to farmland with that homestead?
I'm just saying whatever your tax statement is, it is till you move. Whatever when you get your taxes in the mail, whether it's your farmland or your house, it's your investment. And if it stays like it is, till you move, your taxes stay like they are. And then you make the decision whether you have enough money to roll the ball and move on up and get a bigger house or a bigger farm. I mean, you can work this any way you want. But right now, there's no stability. And I can't see how this game will ever stop unless we do something.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so, sir, the way you described it as far as basically freezing, that's not what this thing does. My understanding is this just is basically saying we're not going to increase valuations any more than 3% per any taxable year.
This would be just another thought to this.
Okay, so that would be like a suggestion.
I think he's asking for an amendment. A best case would be that your property taxes are what they are.
Okay.
Or
The 3% will be good.
Yeah.
But the game will still continue. It's just like, in some of the games you play where you got 3 nutshells and you try to guess where the P is. Right now it's set up, the landowner and the property owner can never find the P. We lose every time you play the game. We can never win.
Senator Holland.
And would it be your contention that basically all types of property, farmland, residential, commercial, has been consistently, the appraised values have all been going up astronomically, or do you feel it's maybe biased towards one or two types of property classes?
I say it's for all types. This just addresses farms and residences. But as you can see, and the way businesses are closing in this state, in small towns, the property tax structure is unsustainable to stay in business.
And if I may, clarification, this actually addresses commercial also.
Okay, well, you guys this is just a suggestion to try to, if we could get something better for the ballot.
Yes. Senator Holland.
Thank you for your responses. Just a request for legislative research. Could Eddie or somebody basically get just some sort of rates of valuation increases by property class type across the state? And if we could get it down more, maybe like into regional areas of the state, that'd be great. I want to basically, my personal bias in this is that I think you're seeing residential properties in particular, those are the ones that have the most issue with the rising appreciation values. And I'd like to get some numbers to back that up, Madam Chair, just see what's out there.
Yes, we'll make that request. And Eddie, I'll add to that. I had an opportunity to visit with the chairman from the House this morning, and he had an excellent idea of a 5-year or 8-year rolling average on residential. If we could take a look at that and see if we would have had that in place, what that slope might have been versus what it currently is. Yep. Thank you. Representative Cordova.
Also, this was kind of brought out in our tax committee, and people have kind of told me this. People that have been in their homes 20, 30 years, now their tax payment is just exactly about what their home payment was when they bought in. And I didn't sign on to have this way. And, you know, a 30-year state, Senator Holland, is 55 and older. A lot of the states on fixed income. And I think people would move here if they knew this would happen, so they could bring their families and move in. I think it's a good start. It may not be how it comes out, but the way it's going now, in my example in Shawnee County, it was one of the counties that had not grown in 10 years. And you can kind of look on the census of Shawnee County, and kind of like when this bill was first passed, maybe 82 or whatever, once that started, the population of Shawnee County has declined even more since then because it's just punitive. So I know you got a tremendous job ahead of you. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry. Virgil, I'm sorry.
Nice try. Representative, or Senator Corson, sorry.
I'm not going to fall for that. I know who the boss is here. You're not going to get me in trouble.
Don't buy donuts. It's my fault.
My question is this. I mean, so the Senate position, at least, is that localities should no longer be able to collect tax on groceries. And then you're saying that we should no longer be able to increase taxes on residential or commercial properties. And so my challenge is just thinking this through is, how do we make sure that localities have the ability to pay for police and fire, public works, public safety, and things of that nature if it seems like we're just cutting off every conceivable revenue stream that they have. We're saying you can't do food and food ingredients. You can no longer increase, under your suggestion, we can no longer increase taxes on property. I just wonder where that money comes from for them. Thank you.
This amendment or suggestion just deals with residential property and farm property. It doesn't freeze it. It freezes where you're at. Every time you make a move, you pick up the new evaluation and the new tax structure. So everything's still rolling like it is. You're still getting the mill levies and whatever you've got now. And it's just kind of like musical chairs. If you think you can afford the next chair, it's your choice. If not, you'll be kind of like in a feel-safe area where you can afford with the money you have to stay in your home.
Any other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate Representative you being here. I know this is not your bill, it's a Senate bill, but you are the first conferee. I do have a question on the very first, the number 1. It says that it can't go up except when, and then talks about new construction or improvements that have been made to the property. And then later it says that the legislature shall define new construction improvements by law, which I guess my question to you is, I'm not a fan of putting in here improvements, because improvements could be siding, windows, and that really is just maintenance. But do you feel that the other language eliminates that potential problem down the road?
I do agree with you on your maintenance. That's just standard to keep your house values where it is. And you could add new construction in there if you want. This is just kind of like a floor thought. The bottom line, what I'm trying to hope to happen if this ever gets out of here, is that the people's taxes are frozen till they make the move. And you can add new construction, of course, and whatever, but I know people that would, if your trouble is if you have a fixed income, there are people are very close to leaving because they have to.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, I don't know if this is a question for Eddie or Revisor Millie or whoever, but just the way I read this bill, even though it would basically cap valuations for different property different properties, your property taxes are still going to go up.
Good.
The point is that they're still going to they're going to adjust the mills to get the budget they need. And so, you know, I guess we can talk about it later. Let me ask you, I do have another question since you brought up farmland. So, and you're a farmer, I'm not, but help me out here. So with the farmland, that's basically use value, right? We're basically, depending upon what you've got that ground in, your tax rate, your property tax rate is based upon that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And my question is isn't there already like an 8-year rolling average?
Senator,
On that stuff.
it is an 8-year rolling average with a 2-year delay. And I thought you did have agriculture land, but maybe I'm wrong. So I won't get into the personal debate. We need to stay on the bill.
No,
But it is an 8-year with a 2-year delay.
the only point I'm trying to make, Madam Chair, is that we're looking at a 3% increase on all property classes. And I'm just wondering I don't think we have the valuation pressures on all property classes. I think we had the valuation
Senator.
on residential, so that's, okay.
Understandable. You asked for the data in order to verify that, and we are requesting that data for your information. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things and I agree with you on, I bought my house 30 years ago, still live in it, paid it off, but my taxes feel like, I'm paying my mortgage payments all over again, except in 2 different installments. So oftentimes we tell individuals, don't keep renting, go buy a house because you're going to recoup your value once you sell your house. And we try to discourage them from renting because it's almost not worth their time because they're wasting their money, for lack of a better term there. And we know many individuals that buy property in a variety of places because when they sell it, they'll make a profit or make more on it. So if we are saying to freeze property, we always felt like the best investment for people is to invest in real estate, regardless of what type of real estate, because eventually you're going to make more than what you bought it for, is the understanding. Do you think if we keep it flat, except when you want to sell it, might be an unfair standard for many reasons if we do that part of it?
I think this would be a great asset because it's just for renters, because once the landlord's taxes are frozen, that should almost pretty well keep your rent prices down. It's awful hard the way it is right now to stay ahead of the moving wheel with the inflation of everything you're fighting. But as you probably know, almost 80 or 90 counties in the last census have lost population. And I think this suggestion would give our neighboring states and other places to make people just cross the line, come on over and spend their money over here.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman and the committee.
I know there was a couple of comments. One, that we have a boss. We don't have a boss. We have a team, and I'm the coach of the team. So, thank you. Our next conferee is Eric Estes. Welcome to the Tax Committee. And committee, he will be submitting written testimony.
Thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me? Now it's on. I had a boss. It was Uncle Bud Estes. Since I was 13, he taught me how to drive a combine against my parents' wishes, and that went well. So I'm a Kansas retailer here. We've got John Deere BTI in western Kansas, Qdoba Mexican Grills that you see across Kansas, and Caribou Coffee Company under Panera Bread brands. So I'm a retailer. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm not much of a politician. Bud had that stomach, and I don't have that stomach. But I can help in the retail side. I spent many years with Sonic Corporate. We traveled around. Under me, I was in charge of building 62 restaurants in Maricopa County, in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. So I did live in all of these states. And then I also decided that I was going to open and build Qdoba Mexican Grills in Texas and in Kansas. So as it relates to the cap, I can speak on behalf of retailers, if that's acceptable for everyone. We as retailers see different states do things differently. Maricopa County does it differently than they do out in Travis County, where we had 2 Qdobas there. Travis County, for instance, did have caps similar to what we're discussing here. In 1997, I mean, we were putting managers in relocation programs so we could relocate managers all over the U.S. for these restaurants. And it was a 10% cap on real estate, so our corporation would purchase Texas real estate because we knew it was a 10% cap. I think Texas thought that was a great thing, and it was at the time. What we saw was our valuations as a corporation would go up 10% about every year. And so I think it's interesting that we're talking about this because a great friend of mine is still there, and he has all of the Qdobas and Sonic Drive-Ins in Oklahoma, Texas. He operates 150 restaurants out there. And he said that in the House and Senate right now, they're discussing taxes. They had the same issue, and it's really a bipartisan issue. It's really one that kind of brings everybody together because we know we have a problem, but there's not a single silver bullet or something that seems to fix all of it. So I think that chiseling away at several issues can really help, can show maybe the Arkansans that we can do something here to maybe help them. I'm not going to be able to speak much on the residential side of the business since that's not really my forte. We see more of the retail business, and I know with the economy that we're all in, we track everything through our software, through all of our restaurants in the state of Kansas, and we track it consistently, and it's fluid. And I can tell you what I see daily is if I go back to 2010, 61% of all of our customers in our 25 locations in Kansas were electronic paying customers. Yesterday was 92%. So I share that part because it's frightening to us as restaurant. We're looking at it and saying, you know, whether you're Dollar General or, you know, Hobby Lobby or your restaurant, you're seeing guests that are frequenting the credit card use. And I know that, you know, in part of us, I have a brother-in-law that is a title closing, security first. And he said he has many constituents that are now trying to pay their mortgages with a credit card in Kansas, in the state of Kansas. And you're talking about in our area, you're talking about Seward County, Ford County, Finney County, Ellis County. And so that in and of itself says, man, maybe we can do something. I offered to help with Karen's committee where there's quite a few retailers. There's some great county appraisers. I mean, some of these county appraisers are brilliant. Sean from Saline County, he's really brilliant. But and then some of the lawmakers that we have on the board are fantastic. So me as the retail side of it, I don't know the lawmaker side of it that you all know, but I can sure help you in what I see coming in. They asked, does a cap rate help us? It does help us in a way. As a commercial, you know, we'll have another one, the Senate Bill 311 coming up that I can discuss too on the 1031 exchange and the implications of those. But a cap definitely sets a standard. And I think what we're looking for, and this is what we're in a very similar meeting in Maricopa County as well for our store in Scottsdale, but we're trying to keep this kind of slot car hitting the tracks. And that way there's some kind of confinement and there's some kind of rules and regs that just everyone can follow. For me as a retailer, we're in 18 counties and there's not one county that's the same. And I've talked to every single one of our county assessors, either they're a tax assessor or they're an appraiser. There's one or the other. They're both very different as to how they look at the valuations of an asset. I can have, for instance, a Qdoba that's identical in Hutchinson, Kansas, and I will take it and I can go put it where I'm at in Hayes, Kansas, and it's vastly different. I mean, we built it with the same contractor in the same year, and it costs us the same. But, you know, you might have one valuation that's $2 million, and you might have one that's $800,000, and there's really no real reason that I can, you know, they have formulas of their own. So my thought was if we could get together and work towards a guidance that just sets principles and standards that each county can possibly follow, not to eliminate everything, but just to keep everyone on track so that we don't get the frequent, hey, your value went up 40%, which I just had that happen. You know, that's more or less why I'm here, and if I can help answer any of those questions, I do have all of that data.
Thank you, Eric. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as a retailer, you also know that each county probably has different valuations depending on the economic development and all of that that's going on in that area.
Absolutely.
Because you see such a huge change, like you said, in valuations from one county to the other, have you ever thought about appealing the process? We have a process in place where if you're not satisfied or if you feel it might be incorrect, that you can file an appeal. As a businessman, have you ever filed an appeal or considered filing an appeal, and how did that turn out?
Every year. Yep. We just completed one a week ago. So they don't really ever turn out well. You know, I think a part of the issue is some go by taxable value. They'll go by, you know, this is your income approach, or we're going to take a cost approach and an income approach, and we're going to combine those, or maybe it's even a sales approach. I think the vast disparity that we see when we move to sell an asset is, most recently we had an asset that was on the books for $1.2 million from the county. I knew it was only worth $600,000. We knew that. To a buyer, our corporate offices wanted the store. That's fine. So we had several offers. Every single offer was in or at or under $600,000, which we sold it for $588,000. You know, and the county was 1.2 for the last 10 years. You know, but there's just disparities that we see, and it's not just restaurants. I mean, you see it across, you know, all commercial assets. We have a full-service steakhouse that's the same way, and we see the similar things. The hotel group, we see that out of Manhattan, Kansas. They're a great group. They're constantly going through that same process, and then I think they've even taken it to Boda, as far as Boda, you know, just to try to see if they can, you know, is there any kind of logic to this? It does affect the way that we build and construct in Kansas. My companies, our startup companies, last month just hired our 12,000th employee for the state of Kansas. So we've moved 12,000 employees into our businesses in Kansas. And we're really proud of that. And I thought, man, I really want to keep the assets on the ground and keep them strong and moving. But what's the limitations to keep us from growing in Kansas? You know, you read about all of these brands that Texas has or California has, Florida has. Where's In-N-Out? Where's all of these great brands? And a lot of it, you know, they look at, you know, and I'm not picking on any particular county, but you look at one and you say, well, they just lost a Target because Target knew that when they sign the lease, they're going to get flipped to a 1031 and their taxes will be unsustainable. That's why they left the county in Kansas. You know, friends of ours at Five Guys, that's why they left. So I just want to caution that I think there's a good measure that we can follow and build for not just residential, but for commercial assets.
Thank you. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as a follow-up to that, I think you mentioned a few businesses in Manhattan, and oftentimes the free enterprise system and capitalism being what it is, I don't know if they didn't make a profit or what happened, but you know, I would hate to just make one and say it's because of property valuation. So that may or not be the cause of why they left, is what I want to say. But the other piece is, are you familiar with dark store theory?
With what? I'm sorry?
The hypothetical lease fee, or how when you go to Boda, for example, if you have your Qdoba, like you said, in Manhattan, Kansas, and say, what's the valuation if it would be in Utah?
Yep.
So comparing, those might not be equivalent from one area to the other. So when you do your assessments and property taxes and compare them from one area to the other, because there is a way to appeal, I think that probably works in your best interest, because there is a process in place to do that. Because a lot of businesses.
Senator, do you have a question?
Well, I was trying to say is, when you go to the Board of Appeals, do you compare it within that area, or are you comparing it to somewhere in another state? You mentioned.
Not another state, no, not another state. And most counties, the one we just appealed 3 weeks ago, that county no longer, as of this year, will accept any comparable outside of their county. So that's a new one. The reason that we went to Texas, in Austin, Texas, Cedar Park, Texas, Round Rock, Texas, believe it or not, every single one of those assets is within $2,000 of each other, Travis County included. So Texas seemed to have a model that does work. They are limited and they are capped on any kind of, like you said, if there's a construction and you add a second story or something like that, that's completely understandable. But Texas, and this is something that I was telling Karen and I showed the board, we are constantly wooed by every corporation, Starbucks included. So many friends of ours in the Starbucks industry, we have Caribou Coffee. They'll come to us and say, hey, I know Kansas is not business friendly, so why don't you build right here in Texas? And we did. And they say that to Starbucks, and they say that to Panera Bread, and my friend at Panera did. Instead of building in Kansas, he took his store out of Manhattan and he built in Cedar Park, and he's doing great. The reason for that is because of the incentives. They know that they're going to get a fixed proposal. A lot of times, and it's hard to explain all of this in one short sentence, but you get, when they go to the bank and they'll get a loan at, say, Emprise Bank, there will be covenants that you need to follow. Those covenants do not allow for massive increases in real estate. The only way that a tenant can get over something like that is by charging its constituents or its customers more money. Inflation, right? They have to inflate their price. And a lot of times, if you have a flag, if you fly a flag, which means if you are Chick-fil-A or if you are Holiday Inn Express, you cannot exceed a certain point. It's not, they don't allow that. So you have to think and weigh those consequences and say, was it worth it for me to leave this city and go to this city, or is it worth it for me to leave this state and go to this state? And in our 25 years, I've seen a lot of that. And that's why I mentioned that BOTA doesn't do it any justice, because, I mean, by the time you spend all the money to go get an appraisal at $5,000, they can choose to or not to accept that, if that makes any sense.
Senator, we are about out of time. Please ask your question quickly.
Just wanted to make a correction that we do have a Panera and we have 6 Starbucks. That's all. Thank you.
Oh my, seriously.
The second one, he built that one up on Tuttle Creek by our Qdoba, and then he moved it to Cedar Park because I helped him with it.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, Eric, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Committee, we have one other conferee, Melissa Campbell. Welcome to the committee.
Hi there, I'm Melissa Campbell, and I'm just coming to you as a private citizen, and I wanted to just touch on the aspects of being a homeowner. And one of the things that we've struggled with is in the pandemic, we're a one-income family, and my husband's employer was not able to provide us with the kind of income increase at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, that would compensate for what our expenditures are with inflation. And so it's been a little tricky to try to make all of the ends meet on our single income. And we've also lived in an area where the county has really increased our property valuation. And we've lived in our house for less than 5 years. And in the last 2 years, we just received our newest property valuation. And between last year's and this year's, they have increased our property value, which is, we purchased our house for less than $500,000. They've increased it $112,000 in the 2 years. That's not really sustainable for our family. And so I still want to be able to raise our kids, and I don't want to have to go back to work. It would really rock our world quite a bit. And so I know that this isn't sustainable. So when I see that there's an opportunity with this SCR 1610 to kind of help manage that a little bit, I'm thankful for it, and I support it and would ask you all to do the same. So we've not done massive improvements on our house that would have warranted that kind of increase. Our neighbors and our neighbors have between 11 and 39% increases in our property valuations. And, I planted a couple trees in my landscaping, and, we maintained our grass pretty well. We didn't change the paint. Like, nothing really significant happened that would have warranted this kind of increase. And so anyway, if we could do something like cap it at 3%, that would really be helpful to us. So anyway, I would urge your support for that. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Would you stand for questions? Yes. Thank you. Senator Holland.
Thanks so much for being here today. Are you particularly wed to the capping at the 3%, or would you be open to different types of constitutional amendments that would ease your property tax burden?
I don't know if I know the ins and the outs of it to be able to answer that well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator, did you have anything specifically in mind? Senator Holland.
Well, for example, like, one other way to go about this would be basically change the assessed valuation of residential property from 11.5% to ratchet that down. Okay, so that would in effect basically shift the tax burden off of residential property owners and basically shift it slightly onto everybody else. Do you mind, can I ask what part of the state you live in?
In Johnson County.
Okay, okay. And obviously you and your neighbors have seen massive valuations. Okay, I'm in Douglas, I've seen the same thing too, but okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands the 3% cap on the valuation. It does not lower your property taxes, does not keep your property tax from increasing. It just is a cap on the valuation. So thank you. Yes. Are there any other proponents? Seeing none, I'll draw your attention to all of the written testimony, and there is quite a bit, so I'm not going to read through those. Are there any opponents that would like to testify? I would bring your attention to Taylor Nickel from the Kansas Livestock Association, written opponent testimony. Is there anybody that would like to testify neutral? Seeing none, there are two written neutral, Spencer Duncan, League of Municipalities, Michael Koss, the City of Overland Park. Committee will close the hearing on SCR 1610. And I would like to, we do have a guest in the audience, Secretary Burkhart. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all your work you do. Thank you. Amelia, would you give us an overview? We'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 311.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill number 311 relates to property taxation and would provide for the exclusion of 1031 exchange transactions as indicators of fair market value. The bill would amend KSA 79503A to provide that the sale price or value at which a property sells or transfers ownership in a Federal Internal Revenue Code Section 1031 exchange shall not be considered an indicator of fair market value, and that 1031 exchange transactions shall not be used as comparable sales for valuation purposes, nor as valid sales for purposes of the sales ratio studies. The bill would take effect from and after publication in the statute book, and I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee questions? Senator Holland.
Madam Chair, I'm just wondering, I don't know what the committee's level of understanding is. Amelia, maybe this is Amelia or Eddie, I don't know, but basically, can you explain a 1031 exchange? And what is exactly going on here? And then could you also tell me what particular property classes this typically affects?
Amelia, would you like to try, or I could ask Revenue? David Harper's in the audience.
In a general sense, I can give you a general idea, but there may be others.
David definitely understands that.
Might be able to provide more information about the types of exchanges, like-kind exchanges that these involve.
No, I appreciate it. And I know you could answer the question, but I will ask David because he was in the meeting that generated this legislation, actually. So
Are there
if
any?
you don't mind, any other questions for Amelia? Seeing none, thank you. David, would you mind? Oh, great, Secretary. We do have a tax lawyer in the room, so Secretary Burkhart is very familiar with this product.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and perhaps Mr. Estes might be the expert in the room. But very quickly, and this is a very basic explanation of the 1031 exchange or like-kind exchange. It really applies to real property investment, real property. And how it works is that you may have a piece of property, it may be a strip mall, and if you sell that, you're going to perhaps experience some capital gain. That gain can be deferred if the proceeds of that sale are then turned around and used to acquire like-kind property. And the way this works, the sale occurs, the proceeds of the sale, instead of going to the seller, goes to what is called a qualified intermediary to hold those funds. If those funds went to the seller, there'd be an automatic recognition of gain. So the intermediary is used. The seller of that property has 45 days to basically go out and find like-kind property. And like-kind is very liberally construed under the Internal Revenue Code and the IRS. You can take a strip mall and sell it and end up acquiring farmland, and that's perfectly appropriate. So that's generally how it works. And, you know, when new property is acquired, that gain is kind of rolled forward, and it can keep going on and on and on as long as you continue to acquire like-kind property. So a very basic explanation.
Very good explanation, though. Thank you. Senator Holland.
Would the secretary stand for additional questions?
Could we hear from the conferee first, and then we'll bring the secretary back? Okay, thank you. So, Eric, welcome back to the committee. Short.
I don't have enough copies, but to make it a little bit. So I can maybe highlight a little bit of that, and that's exactly accurate. Great job, guys. So the 1031, we've been on both sides of that as retailers. And we've been on the side where we were the seller, we were the buyer, and we've also been the victim of it as well. When I say victim of it, I mean there is some collateral damage to it. And I think that what we can address is that maybe put a little stopgap in there to help, particularly small businesses, large businesses as well, but small businesses can benefit from this. And so I'll explain how that works. So I'll just use an example. We have a Qdoba. The Qdoba we built with a developer. The developer was Wigand. They're a great group out of Wichita, Kansas. They built several different stores. They build them all for everyone. They build, Starbucks, everything else you can imagine. Well, once the development process is done, we have a triple net lease. In a triple net lease, I'm responsible as the tenant for the lease, the property taxes, and the insurance. So then I operate and I go to business as we always do, and we do our thing. And it's a really great model for growth, entrepreneurship, or if you want to grow your concept, whatever that concept may be. And so oftentimes, after the developer is done, they will market these properties. They market them not just by the real estate, which is why we wanted to discuss the 1031 exchange and the consequences of one as opposed to real estate. They're actually marketing this as an intrinsic value. So what the buyer is buying and what the seller is selling is this. I have a lease for 20 years, and on the lease, I'm going to pay $1.7 million. So I have it personally guaranteed. I have it corporately guaranteed. The stronger the guarantee, the longer the lease, the higher the amount, the lower the multiple, especially if it's a national brand that folks recognize. Makes it easier to sell. With what we're seeing now is with everyone jumping out of this stock market that we see today. Real estate's a great move. 1031 exchanges have been around a long time. It's a tax diversion tool that's very successful, and it's very successful for a lot of folks. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening is the seller sells this property. It only costs me $800,000 to build the Qdoba. That's all it cost me. He sold us for $2.1 million because the buyer was purchasing my lease along with my real estate asset on the ground. They're really mostly interested in my lease because it's an income revenue stream. So they're able to move their taxes over, through that diversion, and they're able to get an income stream through a strong guarantor off the backside, which they consider mailbox money, but it's a great, it works. It works for both the buyer and the seller. The only folks it doesn't work for is the folks on the ground that are the tenant. The tenant is just working, they're paying the triple net like they're supposed to. Oftentimes, like you said, it's a retail strip center. And in one particular instance, the retail strip center was connected to us. So they sold us. There was 2 tenants in the middle. There was a balloons and more shop and a flower shop. Well, our valuation went so high because the county assessor just took that as face value and said, okay, I think the center must be worth $5 million, not $1 million. It really went that drastic. And so we went from paying $12,000 at Qdoba to almost $50,000, and the balloon shop couldn't pay their bills, and neither could the flower shop. So when I say taxes can put somebody out of business, I truly mean that. It really has happened, and it happened in real time last year. So this idea that we came up with, I think really works, and it's very effective. What it does is it just alerts the appraisers and assessors on the ground that this was a 1031 exchange. It's not the real valuation. This is not like we're used to seeing brick and mortar valuations. I can go and call a contractor and we can build a Caribou coffee shop, and I can do it for $400,000. My friend at Scooters did the same thing, but he's being sold at $2 million per Scooters, and he spent $400,000 on each one. So you can imagine what the tax will look like on the implication side of the 1031 exchange. So I think that, to summarize this as best as I can, this helps both small businesses and large businesses in just eliminating the use of that tool, because we know that it's an intrinsic value. That valuation can change at any given time too. We have to remember that. So they can sell that to a very strong Starbucks with a corporate guarantee, and that's worth $3 million to some investors. What's it worth to U-Haul? $200,000, probably, maybe. They probably don't want the building. So you have both sides of this equation. And what we're trying to do is just mitigate this 1031 from the use of being able to say this is a comparable sale. Because there's folks that aren't a 1031 exchange. They built it with their own bank, that, they run it themselves. It's a mom and pop enterprise, or it's not. But at the same time, to use a comparable from a 1031 next door and say, well, now we think you're worth $2.5 million, that's just not a fair assessment. Luckily, with us being in several states, this is not the first conversation I have had. I know that in other states, they are also amending something very similar to what we're discussing right now in both their houses and senates to try to get a grasp on this. The reason that it's coming up so hot right now is the condition of the stock market. Yeah. We're just seeing them jump out. So
we're about out of time.
Yep. Any questions?
Any questions?
I can help you with that.
So Eric, you would not be able to come back tomorrow. So any questions for Eric today? Seeing none. And then what we can do is I will suspend the hearing, but we will ask Secretary, or actually we will close the hearing, but we will bring Secretary Burkhart back if he would be willing tomorrow to continue with questions. Okay, thank you. So thank you, Eric. Thank you. Is there any other proponents for the hearing? Any other, there's no written, any opponents to the legislation? Any neutral? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 311, and we will pick up this conversation tomorrow at 9:30 with Secretary Burkhart and others. And committee, we did not have time to go over the revenue neutral rate letter. I can tell you the way that we are going to end up meeting Friday. So I'll just let you know so you can schedule now. We will meet Friday morning. I'll adjust the schedule accordingly. Is there any other business to be brought before the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned.